Assistant Superintendent of Public Instructions for the Ohio Department of Education. He's been Assistant Superintendent of, Interim Superintendent of Public Instruction, Ohio Department of Education, and numerous other positions. His recognition and awards is this page right here. If I read it, you'll only get 10 minutes to talk. So some of the highlights are Ohio School Board Association President's Award, 1989, 2002, 2011. Leadership and Service Award from the Ohio Federation of Teachers. Civic Leadership Award from the Ohio Association for Gifted Children. In other words, this gentleman's been in education all his life and has many, many roles that he's assumed. He's here to talk about school funding, the effect of charter schools on school funding, and you have 1 hour to tell us what you believe, sir.
In addition to those awards, I'm also a notary public.
I never know, it's probably on this list too.
You never know how many people are really going to be at any particular meeting. I'm reminded of a couple winters ago when we had a really bad winter. I drove all the way to Lawrence County. Anyone know where Lawrence County is?
Lawrence County.
That's down there. Pardon?
On the river.
Yes, Arden.
Arden.
They pronounce it different here than it's Arden. Anyway, I drove the blizzard for a couple hours, or well, actually 4 hours, and got there, and there's one person in the audience, and the big auditorium, he's way back in the left, way back. And I thought, well, 4 hours in the car one way, I'm going to give this person the real spiel here, the full load, which I did, and it was great. He gave me a standing ovation, and I was just tickled, and so I went back to greet him. I said, "Now, are you from Breezy Ridge?" Now, Breezy Ridge, right? You know what I'm talking about. He said, "Oh, no, I'm Professor Colwell from Purdue University. I'm the next person on this program." You sit here. Do not speak. I have spent a few decades in public education, and just to give you the full disclosure, I truly love the system, the public system. I think it has to do with democracy. It has to do with all the children of all the people. It has to do with the community electing a Board of Education to represent that community on education. I mean, that's what I believe. So, I there are a lot of other belief systems, but that's where I'm coming from. I'm coming from the idea that in the Constitution of Ohio, which was reformed in 1851, the people there could have put in anything in the Constitution that they wanted with regard to education. They could put nothing in. They could put that it was the responsibility of the legislature for some kind of education. But they chose, those delegates chose to put some very specific language that has meaning. The General Assembly shall make such provision by taxation or otherwise as will secure a thorough and efficient system of common schools throughout the state. Now, the idea of a common school has to do with all the children of all the people, and it's held in common. Now, those words have meaning. Not just any old system of education, but a thorough and efficient system of common schools. Now, when we were in litigation, you mentioned that I had been with the State Department of Education, spent 16 years there as Assistant Superintendent of Public Instruction, had a little relationship, well, I had a relationship with the legislature. In fact, had a good relationship with the legislature. I had received a dozen commendations from the House and the Senate. You know, I worked on behalf of education in the halls of the legislature to try to put together this thorough and efficient system that is called for in the Constitution. By the way, I haven't gotten too many of those since I left the department and sued the state. I was on a program with the Senate President a while back. Well, it's been quite a while, and I mentioned, he was sitting over here to my right, I mentioned, you know, I haven't gotten any resolutions of commendation recently. And the President of the Senate at that time said, and you're not about to get any either. So let me know that I wasn't eligible for any. About a week ago, I got one. But it was for something that I had done a year ago. So I guess they vetted it a while before they issued it. But the idea of a thorough and efficient system is what we litigated. You see, that was back in 1991 when the Coalition for Equity and Adequacy of Schools Funding sued the state. The state had been sued in 1976 by the city of Cincinnati, and they sued on the basis that we didn't have a thorough and efficient system, and they asked that the state declare education a fundamental right. Well, here's just less than about a decade later, we sued again. Now, when I say we, I was with the State Department of Education at the time, and I saw this group of Southeastern Ohio people, milling around and talk about suing the state. And those of us at the State Department of Education at the time figured, well, that won't come to anything because, those people in Southeastern Ohio don't have a whole lot of clout. There are more legislative representatives in Cuyahoga County than there are throughout the Appalachian region. So, they don't have any political clout. But that's why we have a court system, to kind of even things out periodically. But they sued the state, realizing that our system is neither equitable nor adequate. It's not thorough and efficient. It's wrong. It's destructive to certain kids, and they didn't have much of a chance of winning because the political climate wasn't right. You've got to have a political climate. You see, the court, House and Senate, the governor's office are all one party. That's not good. As a legislative liaison between the Department of Education and the General Assembly, the best of times were when we had the Senate was 16 members and one party 17. And then the next biennium they switched, back and forth. That was good. You see, that was good for education. Well, in that context, it was not a good situation for the poor districts of Appalachia to sue the state. No political clout there. And there was another organization, and I think probably Gahanna was the problem, was that was a Freudian slip. Gahanna being a little better than Appalachia in terms of the capacity to operate a school system, didn't join this effort to sue the state because it was not a popular thing. There was a group of people, a group of school districts, about 50
58, 59, 60 along in there, a group of school districts that formed an organization called the Alliance for Adequate Funding. And frankly, this group of school districts was concerned about not losing any relative position in the funding pond. See what I mean? And so it was mostly the large urban centers and the poor districts that brought the suit. In fact, the Alliance for Adequate School Funding, the attorney for that wanted to work for the coalition, wanted to be the legal counsel for the coalition, and that didn't happen. And so it just so happened that he started representing this group of school districts that was, a little above the average. And so the Alliance for Adequate School Funding, on several occasions, filed briefs in support of the state's position. Now that didn't help a whole lot, you understand. That did not help a whole lot. Because with the education community was divided, and let's face it, the political clout is in the more affluent districts. In today's world, the political clout is centered in those more affluent districts, not in the Appalachian region, you see. So it really didn't help that some of the districts in Ohio were in fact supporting the state. Now they come up with an interesting idea that we have a constitutional system, but it's unconstitutionally underfunded. Now I don't know what that wordsmithing is all about, but it's unconstitutionally underfunded. It's probably unconstitutional, but that's kind of the way that worked. Well, so there wasn't much of a chance that the school districts of Ohio, or the school districts that are involved in the coalition, the poor districts in the inner cities. The inner cities don't have a whole lot of clout today because of the political makeup of the state house, and so there wasn't any chance. Well, there's very little chance that the court would rule in favor of the Appalachian school districts primarily, or the Coalition for Equity and Adequacy School Funding. You see, in 1976, the court said essentially that the system, even though it was inadequate and inequitable, the court said that it was constitutional because we have a tradition of local control. And so the variations in opportunities is a function of local control. Now, I can't believe they said that with a straight face. Because, in one school district, I worked next to a school district when I was a principal, next to a school district, so the poorest school district, in terms of wealth, property wealth, I think it was the poorest school district in the state. Now, for them to raise $100 per pupil, they would have to, at that time, they would have to put on $7 or $8 or 7 or 8 mills. In order to get up to the state average, that district would have had to raise 50 or 60 mills. Now you can imagine a district, a poor district, income poor district. You can imagine them trying to raise 50, 60, 70 mills just to kind of get up to some sort of an average. Well, the court in 1979, in the case of Cincinnati v. Walter, they said, our system of local control, our tradition of local control is so, they didn't use the word compelling, it's so much a part of our fabric, our moral, our social fabric, that we're just, the system's okay. We know it's inequitable, it's inadequate, but it's okay, it's constitutional because the variations are due to local control. Now, that was a very interesting. Now, I kind of think I know how that came about. See, I was with the State Department of Education when that case was going through the process. And I can document this with letters that the Speaker of the House, the President of the Senate, think about this, the Governor's Office, Speaker of the House, President of the Senate, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court came together and had a discussion about which way the court should rule. Now, I know that to be true. Okay, I was there. Not in the meeting itself, but I know. And I have a letter from a state representative that verified he was privy to the information. So, that political decision in '79 was, everybody figured would, affect the DeWolf decision. But there were a couple courageous Republicans on that Supreme Court in 1997 that did the right thing. And they voted with 2 Democrats and said that Ohio's elementary and secondary schools are neither thorough nor efficient. In order to fix the system, they didn't say you gotta have a formula of this type or you had, specifically. What they said was there are 4 factors that contribute to the unworkability of the system that must be eliminated. 4 factors that contribute to the problem, and they must be eliminated. The very first one was the school foundation level. The school foundation formula. The formula by which the state distributes money. Okay? That's the first factor that must be eliminated. Secondly, was the dependence on property tax in the formula. Now, the court says remedy that and send it back to Perry County where the trial court decision was made in a year and see if the state has fixed it. Went back to the state, manipulated some things, had a public relations machine geared up, criticized the coalition, just we're a bunch of bums, unworthy bums. I mean, I'm dressing it down a little bit, but that was kind of the implication. So, okay, so these people, and it was kind of like, by the way, they're not deserving. It was, it was that kind of, they're not deserving because their parents don't live in upscale communities. They're not deserving. So, went back to the trial court. The trial court said to the state, you really haven't fixed anything. Supreme Court ruled again. Said come back in a year. Gave the state a year. Came back, so it was 97, 2000, 2001. 2001, court said it's not good enough. The court did something very interesting in the third decision. They legislated from the bench. If you don't agree with the decision, you say the court legislated from the bench. Okay? But they were specific in what to do, what the state should do with the formula. Okay? Well, it was at that point that the Chief Justice ordered the parties to a conference. They hired a fellow from Wisconsin to mediate. And after mediation for 3 or 4 months, poor mediator from Wisconsin called the Chief Justice on the way to the airport and said, "I can't fix this. I'm quitting." He was on his way to the airport when the Chief Justice got the call. So that put it back, back in the hands of the court. Now, here's what the issue was. The state wanted to throw a little more money at the problem. You ever hear that? State wanted to throw a little more money at the problem. And offered, I think, like $300 or $400 million more. And it got up to maybe $500 million more. Will you settle for a little more? And we said, no, that's not the issue. It's not so many $100 million as the issue. The issue is you need to fix the system by looking at the needs of kids and then building a funding system that provides for the needs of those kids. Now that wasn't new information. Back in the late 80s, 90s, early 90s, I probably spent 40 hours in testimony before a joint committee. It was co-chaired by then, at that time, Senator Robert Cupp, who later on became a justice on the Supreme Court and is now back in the House after serving as a county commissioner, and that sort of thing. At the time, Senator Cupp issued a report. He wrote the report, the final report of this joint committee, and Senator Cupp said in that report, there must be a relationship between the funding level and the actual cost of a quality basic education. Senator Cupp and I agreed on what quality meant. We disagreed on what quality meant, you see. But the bottom line was that was the right way to do it. That was the right way to do it. Well, during this, some of these negotiations and so forth, I got a lot of flack from even my members, the school district members, because they said, Harry, if you can get 100, if you can get 500 million, take it. Well, what good would that do? Because the next legislative session, that could disappear. And it's not that we didn't trust the state, we just knew we shouldn't trust the state with regard to that sort of thing. I had first-hand experience, 16 years working with the legislature trying to get money for facilities. And a decent operating level. And in fact, I was down Brown County one day. Anybody know where Brown County is? Also down the river, close to the river. And a legislator had me down there, and he was taking me through these old decrepit school buildings. He said, "Phyllis, you got to do something about this." And I said, "Wait, I don't appropriate the money. You guys appropriate the money, right?" But they wouldn't move on facilities. Now fast forward, there are 1,000 new school buildings across the state of Ohio today because of the litigation. And those school buildings aren't there necessarily because the legislature was happy about providing the facilities. I remember, and what happened there was the NPR or the television what do you call the national,
PBS?
yeah. They did a report called Children in America Schools with Bill Moyers. Remember that? Some of you might remember that. Well, that documentary was piped into the living rooms of Americans all over the country, and it had an effect. At the same time, the General Accounting Office, U.S. Congressional Accounting Office, issued a report that Ohio had the worst school buildings in America. And so when we filmed the town hall meeting at Dublin Kaufman High School, when that meeting was filmed, there was a lot of people in Central Ohio stayed away from it because they didn't want to be connected with this group that's suing the state. But when that town hall meeting, which became a part of the documentary, was put together, we had some legislators on the panel who scurried out of the building, and said, "Boy, I'll never be accused of I'll never have a situation, I'll never be in a meeting again where people can say that they don't have textbooks, materials, and supplies." So he got busy and put together a textbook fund, a little Band-Aid. Well, you see, the idea is not just a little more money. The idea is, let's connect the needs of kids with the distribution system. That's what Senator Cupp said back in the early 90s. We got buildings out of the litigation. But then this whole idea that we need to be very conservative on our funding the kids. And it was about the same time in the early 90s, about the same time that the Nation at Risk report started having a real negative effect on school funding. I don't know if any of you have ever heard the Nation at Risk report. It was a Reagan document. President Reagan, when he received the report and had a big White House meeting on it, poor guy said, I'm glad these commissioners that made up the report, he appointed the commission. I'm glad these commissioners, I'm really glad these commissioners recommended getting rid of the U.S. Department of Education, installing school prayer, and there was a third thing, I've momentarily forgotten it, that the report addressed none of the things that he talked about. But that document became a very political document that later on George Bush, Bill Clinton, the next George Bush, and the Obama administration has been using. Okay? Democrat, Republican. And so it looked like in Ohio we're going to have to really start paying attention to school funding. And so another philosophy came into the whole equation, and that philosophy says that schools are so bad we got to get rid of them. We got to give some people alternatives to public education. Voinovich had his committee, and from being a Democrat, I said I'm a Democrat. Voinovich had his parent choice committee. He appointed David Brennan as the head of the choice committee. You ever heard of David Brennan?
The ideology you referred to was Reaganomics, and Voinovich
is the voucher system,
Okay,
if that helps.
yeah. Well, actually, thank you for mentioning vouchers, because that's one of the things Reagan said in the White House ceremony. It was vouchers, school prayer, and the elimination of the U.S. Department of Education. Well, so there was that move to get something else besides public education. And so I recall very vividly that Voinovich invited George Herbert Walker Bush to Ohio, November 25, 1991, specifically. The old Veterans Memorial Hall, which is no more. And he said, you people in Ohio need to give every kid a voucher and let him go wherever he wants to go. Totally antithetical to the idea of the common school. And at the time, we had an elected state board of education. And they didn't like that idea. And essentially challenged that idea, saying, Republican board members, all the board members were saying, public money for public schools. That's it. But Voinovich appointed David Brennan, his buddy, who also was a buddy of George Herbert Walker Bush. And so these people, came together. They appointed their state superintendent, the new state superintendent. Eventually got an appointed board, or partially appointed board. And so with David Brennan getting masterminding a voucher system for Cleveland, that was just a ploy. And then it spread into, now we have about 6 voucher programs. Well, Brennan, as a businessman, of course, he makes money on whatever he does. And he established voucher schools, but they weren't paying enough money. The voucher schools weren't paying enough money. So that moved us into the charter system. A little more lucrative there, okay? So we have now a voucher system and a charter system. But in 1999, the first year that the charter system was put in place, $10 million experiment. Now, what do you do? What's the purpose of an experiment? You check it out. You do a little research, collect some data. You just kind of figure out what you're going to do. This is a good idea. Before the ink was dry on the first voucher iteration, we have a $50 million appropriation. Went from $10 million to $50 million. And then the following year is $93 million. And now it's $1 billion. Okay? Now it is $1 billion. When I came in, I heard you say something about, this was supposed to be for cities and it's supposed to be a program to extricate these poverty-stricken kids from the big system and demonstrate to the public system, how to do it. Well, that's yet to be demonstrated. Okay? And so this, if the charter isn't going to do anything differently than the public system, then there's no reason to have a charter. Okay? So that's kind of where we are, but I think the overall idea of this whole choice movement, and I know we've got a whole industry of choice advocates, a whole industry of charter and a whole industry of advocates that have either no information on what the original purpose of the charter schools was or don't care. had Al Shanker's view of the charter world been really implemented, Al Shanker, the head of the American Federation of Teachers, and he had that particular mechanism been kept in place, where a Board of Education can have its magnet schools, its charter schools, have contracts with parents and teachers. That's a wonderful concept, but it's been hijacked, big time. And now we have a colossal mess on our hands because the charter industry has become so powerful in this state that they control education policy. You can dispute that till the cows come home. That's fact. It all has to do with the flow of money. It has to do with the flow of campaign money. Pure and simple. When David Brenner and Bill Walger give $6.5 million for campaign funds since this whole thing began, how much do you suppose that school district people have given the process? Not very much. In fact, the legislative leader was heard to say that the public school community gave me as much money for my caucus as the charter industry. Education policy in this state would be a lot different. You can just understand that any way you want to, but the bottom line is that's the way it is. And no.
And this Bill Walker, he's the head, excuse me, of the charter school.
Yeah, he's the head of ECOT. And your district pays $250,000 to ECOT for an F-rated program. A guy that started out as a furniture salesman, had somebody write a business plan. The person who wrote the business plan was heard to say, I just developed a business plan to steal. Fact. And seemingly nobody in the legislature wants to do anything about it. In Senate Bill 298, when they left town, when the legislature left town and left Senate Bill 298 on the table, and it just is in the bottom line of House or Senate Bill 298 is that online schools have to verify the number of kids that they actually are being paid, for which they're being paid. That's about what it is. And so what are you getting for the $250,000 you're spending on ECOT?
Fortunately, not much.
What are you getting for the $200,000? I've got the data here. The $200,000 you're giving the Ohio Virtual Academy. The Ohio Virtual Academy is operated by K-12 Inc. The infamous Bill Bennett started, one of the founders of K-12 Inc. The head of that group nationally, he was getting a mere $5 million, a little more than you pay your superintendent here in Gahanna, I suppose.
Didn't he say, was he the one who said teachers are terrorists? Was he the one?
I don't know, there's so many wild statements that made about teachers anymore that it's hard to keep up with that one. So, the Ohio Virtual Academy, you're spending a couple $100,000 from Gahanna. Last time I checked, you're not an F-rated district up here, are you? Well, what are these kids doing going to ECOT? Now, that furniture salesman now has his own jet craft. condominiums in Florida, $1 million house in this county, big cabins at Seneca Lake, lot of, and it's all on the backs of these public school kids across the state. I've passed out a little something I put together here about the charters, and I'm not going to go through that. It's just kind of sickening to realize that our legislature, our governor, won't even cause online charters to prove that they're actually educating the kids. Now that's kind of where we are. I'm just going to quit at this point, and you can talk to me. You tell me where I'm wrong. Tell me what I need to know. Tell me to wash my mouth out for talking about politicians or whatever. But unless this monster is brought under control, we're in a world of hurt. Well, that's kind of where I am.
This, if I could make a comment, this Bill Logger who made $6.9 million contribution or something.
Well, he and Larry are together.
A bunch.
Yeah.
But he runs these schools. So that wasn't his whole salary, obviously. That was just a small percentage of the money he's made off of our public school money that we get.
Yeah, that's the 6.9 million. And yet when you realize that ECOT's getting $100 million a year.
So they're funding their own program with our tax money.
Well, think about this. Almost $500,000 for facilities. An online program. Getting $500,000, that's not quite $500,000, give or take 100,000. $400,000 for vocational technical career education. I mean, can you believe that? We've got vocational technical programs all over this state. And we're giving an online person this year $400,000 for vocational technical programs.
Is that an apprenticeship for botany?
Well, yeah, think about it. You know, this stuff has to do with the integrity of the lawmakers and the governor's office. This is really, you know, people, Logger has another company. He has two companies. I've been in touch with, or let's put it this way, an employee of ECOT contacted me about what kind of behaviors are going on in that organization. The only thing is he's not willing to talk publicly. But when a public official comes to him, and this guy, he had no reason to lie to me. He contacted me. I didn't seek him out. It says that state officials come down their place of business and ask for money. And the exchange is, well, we'll take care of you. When a state representative tells me I don't take any of their money, because I was told, Glenn told me that here's 2 checks. All you have to do to get these checks is to vote for when I want something, you just vote for it. Okay. That's the sort of thing.
Do you think 60, I think it's about 60 schools have written a resolution and or bill to the state for the charter school fees. Do you think if that, I think there's like 590 school districts in
No, there's 613.
Okay. So do you think that if school districts continue to do that, will that have any effect on the legislature?
Peggy Lehner is president, or the chairman of the Education Committee in the Senate, says that it really has to do with bringing public attention to this whole matter. And it does highlight that there are local monies involved in this.
So it wouldn't be a useless effort.
Well, it's interesting to me that so many, there's not one Board of Education in Franklin County that has done this. Not one.
I'd be.
Not one. No. There's so much, I've been involved in education for 58 years. And I've been in Congress, I've been State House. I don't frequent the State House as much now in the last few years as I used to, because it's useless. It's a useless exercise. Okay? I got better things to do with my time. But when I worked in the State Department of Education, we were an independent body, an all-elected body. And I know what pressures legislators can. I've had lots of legislators come to my office when I was at the state and say, so-and-so, you need to get a certificate for so-and-so. I've had Supreme Court members come to my office and want me to do some favor for a friend of theirs. And when we had, I never worked for the appointed board, so my whole tenure, 16 years tenure, had to do with an all-elected board. And, if something was legal, we did it. One time, the Democrat governor's office called, said we want 35 people put on your payroll. Well, if they have the qualifications and we identify those, what they were, and you have them submit an application, if they meet the criteria, and they are the top candidate, they'll be appointed. So, well, you don't understand. We want them appointed. They helped us in the campaign. Well, last time I checked, we don't appoint the governor's people, and the governor doesn't appoint our people. If the governor has a problem with that, he can let us know. Now, that's a lot different than it is today. Yes, sir.
Quick announcement, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have to be out of here by 3 o'clock. And so we're gonna talk for another 5 minutes, and then we need to.
No, wait a minute, we got 9 minutes.
We have to put the chairs away. So, yeah, we got to 3 o'clock. If you have any questions, please.
If everybody helps with the chairs, maybe.
Yeah, we can help you put the chairs away.
Well,
Thank you.
Yeah, just tell me that when I need to hit the road.
I'll be happy.
My question is for Jason or maybe Burl. in looking at the 58 or 60.
Oh,
Oh, is she here?
sorry, I came late.
Oh, okay, sorry. Well, yeah, when looking at the 58 or 60 school districts in Ohio that have said something to the legislature about the charter public funding issues, have you got a sense of how many of them were requests for a refund, and how many were just, you guys need to fix this, resolutions? Do you have a sense of?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the only people that I know who are keeping track like that is the group, I'm going to get it wrong, Public Education Partners. And I don't know, I mean, I've spoken with them.
Actually, it's
I don't-
61 now.
Yeah, I was going to say it's 60. I have looked at individual resolutions, and there
Right.
is varying approach. There are varying approaches to those resolutions, but as far as I know, the last time I talked to someone from Public Education Partners, they hadn't compiled the information like that. So I don't know. I don't know if either of you know, but I don't know off the top of my head how many of those resolutions included a bill language and how many did
All
not.
of them have.
Not all of them have. Like Dayton did not include.
I have Dayton's.
Yeah, theirs includes language to ask the legislature to make changes to, but it didn't include, I think she's asking specifically about language to bill the state. Not every single resolution included language to bill the state.
Yeah, because like Gahanna knows how much money
Well,
went out of our public taxes for these 192 kids.
Right.
So you could send a bill for that amount of money. That's what I was asking.
I have on file the 60 districts that have billed the state with the bill.
What their
The actual-
comments.
A delineation of it, so. I send the information to Public Education Partners, that's how they go.
So do you, I mean, when I went and looked myself, I couldn't find the information, so I went to each individual district's board minutes and actually pulled resolutions from the minutes. If there's information beyond that, I don't have it, because I don't have access to it, so.
Well, how many resolutions and how many do you want?
I'd like to see them all. I mean, I would like to see all of them, quite honestly. I mean, as we're trying to figure out what we want to do, we would like to see what other districts are doing. We would like to see the language, because it isn't all the same from all of the districts.
No, each board crafts its
Right.
own.
Yeah, so, I mean, if you have access to it in a way that's easier than what I've been doing, I'd love to have that information. I'm not one of the board members who's working on the committee, Jason is, so, and one of our other board members who's not here today, but the more
Well, give me your
information,
email address.
the better, sure.
Give me your email address.
I need the whole board's email address.
There you go.
Forward.
There you go.
That's everybody on the board, except for one.
So you're-
There's one outstanding.